All right, hello, welcome back, everybody. PayPal, Patreon, and the YouTube Super whatever buttons are all down below. If you want to support me, only do so if you actually can. And as always, if anybody wants these graphs, access to these, or hundreds of other kinds of different graphs across all kinds of different subjects, then they're all available for free in a drive folder linked in the description. Any financial support helps with the maintenance and upkeep of all that as well. So it's time for the first monthly oil demand levels update of 2026. Going down the list, starting with still and effectively at this point always to be the largest oil consumer, the U.S., continuing its rough, undulating, oscillating plateau of consumption around 20 million barrels per day, where it has been since the mid 2000s, this time most recently coming in at 20.2. China, meanwhile, has seemingly hit their peak and will probably plateau for a little bit before starting to decline, but also because of economic blowback from their upcoming attempted Taiwan invasion. When that happens, they're probably going to see a substantial sudden drop, even if that only ends up being temporary. But for the time being, for the last 3 years or so, maybe a little bit more, they've topped right around 17 million barrels per day and fluctuated between 16 and 18, previously having gone up to 17.5, but this time coming in back down at a flat 17. India continuing to grow in consumption meanwhile, and this time almost reaching 6 million barrels per day of oil demand, coming just short of it, and I mean just short of it, by 0.02. They came in this time at 5.98 million barrels per day. So almost certainly within the next couple months, they are going to hit 6 million barrels per day for the first time. Japan was once up at 6 million barrels per day, but over the last 3.5 decades, they have declined due to a mixture of rapid upsurge in fuel efficiency, the continued trend of mass public transit usage, and the decline and majorly aging of their population, since as people get older, they start going less places, doing less stuff, working less, buying less things, which means less stuff is moved around. So they've declined down to averaging closer to 3.5 or so, this time coming in at 3.32. Russia, I apologize, but they have made getting any kind of reliable data from them extraneously difficult at this point, as they've classified all different kinds of data and also just stopped releasing stuff. So you have to go by a lot of different inferences and work out some different avenues of math based on numbers that you can get. Back in the USSR times, at the height in the 1980s, within the USSR, just Russia consumed about 5 million barrels per day out of the 7.5 million barrel per day total demand of the USSR. That crashed down towards 2 when the USSR fell apart, climbed back up close to 4 before invading Ukraine, and in the economic fallout since then, it has dropped down more towards around 3 and fluctuated a bit over and underneath. And most recently was down most likely somewhere around 2.7. And given that this is around when their low point demand of the year is, they're probably still there. They might be down to 2.6, but I really can't say for certain anymore. They'll be climbing up by a few 100,000 as things go into summer, as like many other countries, summer is their higher point of demand of the year. South Korea in present day has capped off or plateaued around 2.8, and this time they came in at 2.75. Brazil did not give any data this time, but most recently, last month, they had come in at 2.8 million barrels per day, one of their highest numbers in quite a bit, and they've been unstable ever since the early 2010s when they started to economically fall apart and have been recovering from that. But their oil demand has been kind of all over the place between 2 and 3. Canada is holding around 2.5 and has been doing so for quite a while, and this time they came in at 2.41. Indonesia in present day is up over 2 and making their way towards averaging 2.5. Most recently, they came in at 2.21. Germany was once up at 3, but has declined over the last 3 decades or so down to, well, closer to 2, this time coming in at 2.13. Iran is normally, under normal circumstances, close to 2 million barrels per day of oil demand domestically in present day. And most recently, the last number was, I think, 1.8 or 1.7, but that was a month or two ago. And under the current circumstances in the country, with the whole uprising thing going on and business and everything else grinding to a halt because of that, their current domestic consumption is likely a lot lower than 1.7 or 1.8 million barrels per day. But because they've gone into basically blackout mode, I have no idea or data availability for what anything actually is at the moment. Mexico once had a demand level up around 2 million, and during COVID, they crashed all the way down to 1. They are back up to about 1.8 and are very slowly inching their way back upwards from here towards 2. We'll see if they ever actually get back to 2. But this time they came in at 1.82 million barrels per day. The UK in present day post COVID has been averaging around 1.5. This time they came in at 1.42. France in present day post COVID has been averaging about 1.6. This time they came in suddenly down at 1.38. Italy was once up at 2, but they've declined over time down to averaging around 1.3. This time they came in a bit up from that though at 1.41. Spain is also usually at about 1.3, and they came in at 1.29 this time. Turkey in present day is up to about 1.3. This time, however, they dropped back down towards 1.2 and came in at 1.21 million barrels per day. Singapore was once up close to 1.5, but they peaked in the 2010s and have been on their way down since then, and are down to averaging more around 1.3 or 1.2, this time coming in at a flat 1.2. Thailand post-COVID seems to have hit their plateau demand-wise and has been staying between 1.2 and 1.3. This time they came in down at 1.13 million barrels per day. The UAE in present day is all the way up to over 1.2 usually. This time they came in at a flat 1.2 million barrels per day. Australia is on their way upwards, climbing from 1.1 up towards 1.2, and this time they came in at 1.14, and then dropping under 1 million. Iraq in present day is usually now up in the 900,000s for their domestic consumption, and this time they came in right at 1 million barrels per day, actually. Netherlands used to be at about 1 for a few years, but have since declined down to averaging more around 900,000. This time they came in at 884. Taiwan also used to be at 1 million, and they were there for 2 decades or so on a plateau, but they have since also declined down to more around 900,000. This time, however, they dropped all the way down to 786. Malaysia in present day is usually in the 800,000s, and this time they came in with a consumption level of around roughly 860. Egypt did not release data this time. Poland, Polska, is up to usually about 800. This time they were a bit down at 743. Vietnam has gotten close to 800,000 in terms of their demand. They were in the 700s a lot last year, but it looks like for their end of the year / start of the year, this year numbers, they dropped back down to what is usually their lower point of the year, coming in around 660 or so. Nigeria had an upsurge in demand to one of the higher points that they've been at for quite a while, coming in at 792,000. They've been growing, making their way from 600 up towards 700, and their highest points ever were up in the 800s a few times. Argentina is now usually in the 700s, but they fluctuate around pretty wildly depending on what new economic crisis they're going through. And this time it looks like they came in roughly around 710,000. Belgium has been declining from 700,000 down towards 600,000, or they're already down to about 600. This time they came in at 598. South Africa, at its highest point, was up in the 600s, but has been up and down and all over the place as the country has gone through one crisis after another and is in its self-inflicted death spiral. Most recently, they have come in a bit back up at 570,000 barrels per day of consumption. Colombia in present day is up to around or a bit above 500,000 on average, although this time they came in back down just a bit under at 470. Kazakhstan is also usually in the 500,000s, and this time they also came in back down under by a little bit at 480. Algeria is almost up to 500,000 for the first time, coming in just short by a few thousand at 496,000 barrels per day of domestic consumption. No data from the Philippines this time, but they usually go months without releasing anything before then releasing a bunch of retroactive data. Chile has plateaued off at about 400, and this time came in at 401,000. Nothing for Morocco, but they follow the same behavioral pattern as the Philippines. Ecuador is up to around or usually a bit above 300 in present day, as their export ratio continues shrinking because their production is also declining. So the two numbers are racing to meet each other. This time they came in at 285,000 barrels per day. Nothing new from Peru this time. Sweden in present day is usually down to around 300. This time they came in decently down from that though at 247. Greece is usually around 300 and they came in at 322. Romania failed to update, but they're usually around 250. Portugal is also usually around 250, but this time they came in with a sudden drop down to 190. And then the 200s group, countries that are usually right around either a bit over or somewhat under 200,000. Starting with Austria, this time coming in at 232, and just a bit above them, the Czechs came in at 237,000. Hungary, Magyar came in at 178. Switzerland came in at 187. Finland, Suomi, did not update this time, but they did come in at 167 last time, so a bit down. Norway came in up at 248,000, and I was finally able to get stuff for Libya, and they came in a bit under at 170,000 for their domestic consumption. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you everybody for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal and Patreon are down there, along with the YouTube buttons and whatever. Only support me if you actually can. The link to the Drive folder with these graphs and all the other free stuff is in the description. There's a link to my cat's YouTube channel in the top pinned comment. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.